Which format do we go to now? Do we go LTA?
Sure. I mean, look, I think a lot's already been said about the LTA format, but I mean, I'm just waiting for the inevitable, guys, which is the wow, our viewership is so good post, even though, of course, now they're going to be combining regions. And are they going to get anywhere close to the combined viewership of the previously? No, of course not. Also, I think you're going to hit the point where viewership is actually going to go down in the semis and finals, which is actually what you don't want. But the question becomes, okay, so we had these 4 matchups between LTA North and South, and none of the LTA South teams even got into the semifinals, which is a fucking disaster. So how does this act like, is the questions are this, is there actually enough meaningful cross competition, because there's no losers bracket? They meet now, they don't play in spring, and then LTA North and South play again in summer. And my question is, like, how is this one league when they play a handful of games against each other every year, and it's only in winter 4 games minimum, 4 best of 3s minimum, and then in summer when they meet for the chance to go to Worlds? Like, why did we have to rebrand both of them LTA North and South instead of just having LCS and CBLOL and then just having this combined bracket? It feels like you lose all of the brand equity that you've built up, but because you want to create one league, but it doesn't feel like one league at all.
No, by the way, there's 2 things here. I'll do the same logic again. I just write. Why do leagues with 2 different groups where they? It doesn't make any sense. Let's make one group. I actually thought that's what we discussed all those years when we thought it was just CBLOL, Monty. Is you don't do it this like cross-regional play. You have just the 2 groups combined, and then you combine the viewership, you combine the fan base, you combine the rivalries. Then people play against each other, people scrim against each other. But the weirdest
which is what they did in Valorant. To be clear, they've already done this in a different game.
The obvious fix here is, I'll tell you why. Part 1, I'll address secondly. Keep it best of 3 like that in the early part of the playoffs, but make it double a limb. Here's why I say keep it best of 3, Monty. Because I know Riot, Monty. Let me go back in a time machine with you to 2013 when they launched the LCS. We'd already had tournaments that were double a limb, mate. MLGs were double a limb, IPL's double a limb. We had tournaments that had BO5s. In fact, obviously, OGN was already BO5 in like semis onwards, etc. But here's the reason I always thought it was so cynically obvious that they started the EU and NALCS with best of 3 until the final. Because they thought, like the NFL, you want that sort of any given Sunday vibe. You want the chance of the underdog, the upset. So when they made these regions combined, I think they were smart enough to know that if one region has millions and millions of dollars and the other one just has like not millions of dollars, that the millions of dollars one's going to be advantage. Well, we all know the BO3 gives you a better chance of winning the series. So I think they thought the BO3 was the equalizer. So you know what? You can have it, Riot. In Fearless Draft, maybe BO3 should be the equalizer. The problem is no lower bracket just ruined it, because now when your entire conference got eliminated in round 1, and that's where the rest of the tournament is, and they brought the viewership, you've checkmated yourself on that one, mate. If there was a lower bracket, you could still have more. By the way, I don't know how many times I have to explain this, right? More matches equals more viewership. I know that fucking blows your mind, but it does. It just does.
Also, why don't you tell them, as somebody who's from Counter-Strike, what happens when the Brazilian teams get eliminated from events in Brazil?
Well,
do they come to the arena?
It's essentially the same concept as what happens in China when there's only a Chinese audience and then the Chinese team loses. The problem is they just won't turn up to the next game. And there's actually a logic to this where you can't totally blame the fans, which is the way it works before you know what the result's going to be is obviously if your team goes to the finals, you want to have tickets for all the days, don't you? So you buy all the days. They even usually give you a cheaper price to buy all the tickets for the days. And then what happens is when your team gets eliminated on day 1, and in fact, if all Brazilian or all South American teams get eliminated, you're just going to go, I'm not going to bother going. And either if you can sell your ticket, you sell your ticket, or you just don't. And unfortunately, you can actually have venues, it's happened in Counter-Strike many times, where it is sold out, but it still looks like there's half the people there because like the Brazilian best team got knocked out. And so they were like, I'm not going to bother going. So it's actually a flaw again. This is about event management and how do you sell the tickets and how do you, it's super complicated stuff. But yeah, sadly, that's also clearly like egg on their face as well, Monty, because the dream here was at least one like the obvious one should have been Loud, mate, just because it's the Brazilian one in it. The dream would be that Loud at least made the semis, you know? The fact that they don't means you've almost made... Like, I actually think you're right. You might just even in the fucking... what the stage looks like and all that shit. It might just be trash now.
Additionally, it's like... It's like talking to like I spoke to figures in the Brazilian community last year to understand like the implications of everything, and it's like they don't even get to have their matchups played out. They don't even get to determine, anything really. It's like it's like they don't even get their matchups played out. They don't get their own storylines because it's like the Brazil fan base was very well aware of the fact that they're not a region that is good enough to compete internationally. They didn't give a shit about this. It's like they laughed at their own team and said, "Oh, our macro is shit," but this is our macro. It's like we love our storylines because. In terms of the passion, it's like in terms of how they deliver it through just the aggression in terms of them standing up and shouting shit, it's like everyone's bought into all of the storylines. So they killed two teams, which killed practically a lot of storylines that were in place. And at the same time, there is no conclusion here at all. It's very, very sad. So like I think from Brazil's standpoint, it's like Umti almost did everyone a favor by letting he just almost let Isurus go through and we had Latam in, but there were too many powerful forces at play. Even Umti on his worst. It's best of three, so it's obviously it's worse.
That would have been even worse because actually they're not that's the Argentinian teams. That would be even worse. Now you just let the Argentinians go through, but no one's going to turn up. No one's going to be in that venue.
And it's like, bro, the follow up even, in spring they're playing BO1s again. What are we doing? What a regression. It's like you have 8 teams, so you have the benefit of having less show days and you can just do 2 best of 3 days. And that's like, God bless, you have 8 teams. Now they go back to BO1s again in spring. You're in a position where there's only like 2 MSI slots, right? You only get 1 from North America. So competitively also that feels like shit if you're in North America. I know that Mark said that this is something that teams wanted because they wanted to be on the show both days because that would benefit them. But I don't know, man. Just stream your scrims. Just stream your scrims.
The new meta. There's also ways they could have made this more interesting. Like if they want to make it a Mickey Mouse match, why not just do what they did at Esports World Cup and just put all the North teams on one side of the bracket and all the South teams on the other side of the bracket, right? You can even swap teams for the semifinals. You could cross over the bracket and put the lower seeded team that qualifies for semis from North and South, have them flip brackets. So you have like number 1 LTA versus number 2, or number 1 North versus number 2 South, number 1 North versus, or number 1 South versus number 2 North, right? There's ways you can do this to ensure that there is some level of participation from the Brazilians or LTA South in the actual semifinals. It's just, the question becomes, with such little cross-pollination, how does the Brazilian scene actually get good enough to beat LTA North teams? And that's my question. When they meet at the end of summer, which by the way, the teams that get eliminated, they just go home, they go on vacation. They're not going to keep practicing, right? And then we get a whole nother year and Riot's making all these changes. Everybody has to relearn the game again. So it doesn't actually help them to have scrims if they're not actually qualifying. One of them will be guaranteed to qualify for Worlds, but the most of them, it won't make a difference. And here, it's like they have this short little mini tournament. They're there for a couple weeks. They get some scrims, but is that enough to make them good? Are they even scrimming each other? Maybe the LTA North teams are just only scrimming each other, right? And now that all the South teams have been eliminated, are any of the South teams even practicing? Right? Are they even scrimming anymore?
The roughest part, right, is it's just such a logistical nightmare because even as the regions are active, they can't scrim each other. The ping difference is just way too big, so there is no like cross play in terms of practice. It's like if there was no logistical nightmare at all, like what I would want to do is like create a scenario where it's like you mix it, right? It's like after the seeding, you just put like the lower end North American teams, you put them in Brazil, and you take like the stronger teams. So you just like eventually get to a point where you get like all the strong teams in one place. But I understand, of course, like the logistical nightmare of this in terms of like setting up offices and all that jazz. But that would be like the ideal in the end, that it's like, oh, these bad teams in North America, let's send them over there and see how they do, and let's bring over like the strong teams with the fan bases, because I think in the end, eventually we're going to get to that point where it's going to be just one league. They're going to take the biggest names, the biggest teams, and then there's just going to be like one league, and then all these teams that are at the bottom just fuck off, because it seems like teams don't want to participate anyway. You know, we have guest teams and shit.
Yeah. Two things. One, that is actually literally how Brazilians got good in Counter-Strike. Before they were good, they moved to LA, went into houses there and practiced the NA teams who were better at the time, and then leveled their game up. And eventually it just became the thing that a lot of people don't know. It wasn't just Luminosity. There were like 2 or 3 Brazilian teams that were all doing that, and they were all grinding out. And that was what you did once you sort of got to the top of the Brazilian scene. Then you moved to LA and you joined this thing, and that let you get into the international market. In fact, you could even play in the NA region. And so first of all, I do think inevitably that should be a thing. Secondly, the other reason why this playoff format sucks so hard is because, as you just said, Yamato, you eliminated all the bad teams before crossing the regions. So you've now made fans actually think LTA North just clears. No, I'll tell you right now, you take those bottom fucking LTA North teams and have them play a game against the best teams from LTA South. Some of them would have lost. They would actually have been beaten. Like, some of those teams were not fucking good. Some of them had dodgy ass rosters, but you didn't even give them a chance to get like those wins. And by the way, those wins are important. Those are like confidence builders. You like know that we can play against them. The meta makes that they're not unbeatable. But you didn't get that. You just took the absolute best. And remember, we've got the absolute 4 best teams here. You just took them. Most of them are even experienced and have like world's fucking experience and shit. And then you just put them against these teams. And then Peter Dunn even told me, because remember, he's a sort of lunatic that like core streams fucking LTA South, not even the North one, and watches and actually really go, oh, cheers for them all, because he's so optimistic, obviously. He even says that, believe it or not, it's almost the worst bracket draw. And like if he could just like change around which South team plays which North, you could have had an upset. But like these were almost like the exact wrong ones to play against the best LTA North team. So you also would never have gotten the upset, unfortunately.
Yeah, and maybe it's just unlucky, but my question to people is that has LCS, have North American teams playing at international events intermittently made North American teams as good as Chinese or Korean teams? No. So why would meeting 2 times a year for a bracket make Brazilian teams as good as LTA North teams? And to your point, Thor, not only about Counter-Strike, but look at Valorant. The Brazilian teams are highly competitive in Valorant because they're in the same place playing with no ping and actually practicing. I've said this example a million times. The same thing happened with Overwatch League. When the players all got together in LA, the Koreans were still very good, but mixed rosters of Korean and Western players started to actually win titles in Overwatch League. And the Western players got better and stepped up to the level of Korean players when it came to Overwatch. Were there still more good Korean players? Yes. But it was a significantly smaller difference. And there were elite world-class Western players. And we're seeing that in Valorant. North American scene is very, very strong in Valorant, and part of that, I think, is the mixture of the Brazilian and the North American players playing against each other and practicing against each other constantly. So, I mean, I just don't understand the purpose of this, because like it just feels like, okay, maybe there's occasionally an upset, but it's a quarterfinal upset. Is it ever a semifinal upset? Probably not. Is it ever a finals upset? Almost certainly not, right? So how does this actually improve things? How does this make Brazil more fun to watch? Because now it just feels like, oh, well, at the end of winter, we just get shit stomped. And now we can just hibernate until the end of summer when one of our teams will go to Worlds guaranteed, even if they're terrible, even if they get eliminated early in the playoffs. As long as they make it the furthest, they're the one that's going. I mean, it's not a good feeling, right? There's almost no level of delusion that can sustain you if the 5th, 6th best team going to in the LTA playoffs is the one representing Brazil at Worlds. Like, you can't even get further than that. How do you have any hope at Worlds?
By the way, I will say the only condition in which they could ever do anything from the South in theory is you need the right Korean or something like that, since they do the imports. I'll tell you a very quick sidebar story, and this is going to be, so I very rarely ever do, this is going to be a tale from my life, Yamato Cannon, as a younger man. So what happens is, do you remember back in the day, in the 90s, there was a classic one-hit wonder, and it was called The One and Only by a guy called Chesney Hawkins. It went, I am the one and only. Anyway, you might remember it was actually the reason why Heaton in CS had that nickname, because someone put that music on that 1v5 he did against 4Kings on Aztec back in the day at CPL. So anyway, this guy, that one song was literally like a one-hit wonder. Like if you were at any jukebox for like 20 years, it'd be in there. Everyone loved to like hear it if you like classic hits or whatever. But that guy had no career beyond that. Like I don't know if he ever did an album. No one ever fucking heard from this guy. It's one of those guys where you have one song and that's it. And all you need to know is like something like 10 plus years later, when I was a student, you know, when you go along and you see there's a night with like all tribute bands, and you know, it'll be like, you know, the Rumbling Stones or like Led Zeppelin or whatever. And it's always like, oh, that's just the tribute band player. His name was on the flyer, but it wasn't like a tribute. It was just him. And it was like, wait a minute. And I was looking and it wasn't even like a concert. You didn't have to like pay anything extra. It was like normal, like cover charge of like drink one drink and this guy's going to like play a gig. And by the way, so obviously we were like, what the? That guy's played here. That's how badly his career had gone, the 10 years, by the way. He's now just doing like local student venues in the UK, doing that fucking song still. And by the way, when we went to this night, like, we've got to go to this. Obviously, we just did the obnoxious shit where the whole time everyone's just like, I don't even know this song. Play the one and only, mate. Play that song, the one and only. So anyway, this is all to say, and this is so self-indulgent, but that's what this show's about. This is all to say, when I was watching these playoffs, I was getting ready to power up. Everyone's telling me, oh, which ones are they good in the South? I don't watch LTA South. I'm not Peter Dunn. I start watching and I go, Winsome plays for fucking Loud. Winsome. That Winsome. The fucking Cloud9 LS Winsome. This motherfucker is still alive and playing games. Like, holy, that's like Chesley Hawks level shit. Holy, he's still out there, bro. He's still out there trying to do it. And you know what, Monty? He still plays his classic, The Int. Whatever. It wasn't even worth it, that punchline. I don't give a shit, bro. That's who I am.
Too good.
Hit segment for Winston. There you go. Fuck off. Well, he has second gear. He went to South America, so all right, fair play, mate. You left the continent.
Oh shit. Yeah. I thought we were bringing some angle like, there was this one time where Brazil upset EDG or some shit, you know, 2016. Yeah, the roster. I don't even remember what they're called anymore, but
that was INTZ. That was Peter Dunn. And then before that was the Kaboom Alliance one. Yeah, it's true. Those did happen.
But yeah, it just feels so bad to watch this because prior to the playoffs, like LTA viewership was a lot lower than it was last year, particularly in like average concurrent viewers. And even then, I mean, Riot keeps pulling new tricks, man. The only reason it was close, like it wasn't even that close, but the only reason it was like moderately respectable was because Moist, Critical, and Ludwig were co-streaming. I mean, how many more people like co-streamers can they sucker into, like streaming celebrities can they sucker into the LTA? Because that's the real question, right? Yeah. We've seen LEC without Ibai, you know, drop in terms of average concurrent viewership. They're just so reliant on having the next like big gaming personality in general gaming come over and like prop up their garbage viewership. And I just, you know, eventually you're just going to run out of that, right? That can't be a viable long-term strategy. I can't imagine that Moist and Ludwig are going to long-term co-stream this, right? You know, it's just not going to happen.
Especially not with this roster. That's not happening.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.